What's going on, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast, coming to you live Monday, August 26th, 2024. The college football season is back officially with that week 0 game between Florida State and Georgia Tech kicking us off, but the rest of the sport will catch up and be on center stage Saturday night across the country. Really excited to bring you guys a special guest. I am joined by none other than Juck on Bucks, one of my absolute favorites in the Ohio State market. Juck, how you doing, man? Thanks for being here.
Fantastic, man. Absolutely love Scoop Duck. I love you and J-Hop. You guys, the best Oregon show there is. I'm so happy to be back with you again. You were one of my very first collabs I ever did, so it's really fun to join back up with you again.
No doubt, no doubt. And I feel like with Oregon's move to the Big Ten, obviously Oregon and Ohio State are being mentioned, not necessarily in the same vein. We know that Ohio State is the more accomplished program, I feel like is a good way to put it. They've won national championships for it before. They've been at the forefront of the sport for a long time. But now Oregon, amid this move to the Big Ten, it feels like Dan Lanning and the Ducks are right there in the thick of it, sometimes even being viewed as favorites to win the Big Ten in their first year.
Absolutely. I really don't like it when people talk about try to put down Oregon with what, the past no national championships and stuff like that. Like, this team is 100% legit. They've got all the bodies they need. They got the coaches they need. They're right there. I view this season, Georgia and Ohio State, as kind of 1A and 1B. And Oregon is right behind them. And they're absolutely legit. They definitely have what it takes to win a national championship. I can't wait for the season to start. I definitely think they're contenders for it.
Yeah, it seems like they're going to be in every game for sure, if not outright favored in every game that they play this year, which is pretty crazy to say, honestly, just looking at how the Big Ten is established and some of those games on the schedule. We got Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin. Those are some of the fun ones that really catch our eye here as we head into week 1 of the college football season. We're going to talk plenty of Ohio State and Oregon, Juck. Your viewers know that, my viewers know that, but want to do something a little bit different here and start the show off with a little bit of a broader focus on college football. Maybe we talk a little bit about that Florida State Georgia Tech game that opened up the season all the way out in Dublin, Ireland, as Georgia Tech stunned the Florida State Seminoles with a 24-21 win. What did we think of this one, Juck?
I mean, what a way to start the season, right? We wait all this time, and this offseason was particularly long for me because I started the show talking about football every day. What a way to start, and I absolutely love it because I just can't – all these coaching lists all over the offseason had Mike Norvell over Ryan Day, and that really made me bitter. He takes his boys out there, and their philosophy is they were just boasting about it. They want to spend 70% on player retention and portal, basically not focusing on high school recruiting. And sometimes that's going to blow up. You don't have a lot of time to spend with portal players. You sign them quickly. And, I think that this is a case right now where we're seeing they're not quite what they thought they were, the guys that they brought in. And, I like it because I haven't had good interactions with Florida State since I started the show. So I'm happy about it.
Yeah, it was a fun one to watch. I was also in that group of folks that were stunned to see the Yellow Jackets come away with the win over Florida State. There was so much hype around Florida State going into the year, and I think a good amount of that was warranted, right? With the way that Norvell has managed the roster. They were able to win the ACC last year despite a key injury to, is it Travis Rudolph? That's his name, right? Why am I forgetting the name? I think, Travis Rudolph totally shattered his leg on the back end of the regular season, but they were able to get that win. And then they definitely started the year with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because they were left out of the playoff. But Georgia Tech, they were just, the whole time I was watching those highlights, it was just saying, yeah, we're here. We took that first punch from you. And they were able to play a great brand of football. I loved what I saw from their running back, Jamal Haynes, 11 carries for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. But now there seems to be like a lot of blowback in the Florida State market because those fans were really kind of being sold a lot of hype. It felt like, right? And I think that that's something that a lot of them are upset about. It seems like after that week 1 loss, but week
It's
0.
really interesting, Max. I've seen this as well. They are mad at the journalists who cover the team, the guys on the beat, for selling them a bill of goods. And I mean, I guess you would know more about this being in kind of that space, but that's interesting. I've not seen that before. Getting mad at the beat for like they're unsubscribing and basically saying like you lied to us because Florida State went out and laid an egg. I mean, it's game 1. It can happen to any team to go out and lay an egg. Plus, you're traveling halfway across the world. That's certainly, some teams are going to adjust better to that than others. But they did get dominated. That wasn't a fluke. They absolutely got whooped up and down the field by Georgia Tech. And you're right. After that first drive, watching Florida State march down the field, I was like, we're in for a long one. They came right back. Georgia Tech looked really good. And I'm impressed by that team. I actually think, that wasn't just a case of Florida State not being up to snuff. I think Georgia Tech's pretty darn good.
And maybe the ACC will be more entertaining than people think this year. I think with
Right.
the Power 4 discussion, everyone kind of sweeps the ACC off to the side, but maybe that was a bad loss for Florida State. Granted, it was close, but on paper, a bad loss, but maybe it'll be good for the ACC as we get the season underway here. I think that Florida State's obviously been viewed as the front runner in that conference, but maybe Miami's going to be able to make some noise. I think that's one of my favorite games on that week 1 schedule. We got Hurricanes and Gators to start off things.
Yes, I've had Miami winning the conference for quite a while. In fact, we were talking about the AP poll earlier. They're 19. I think that's really undervaluing Miami. I'm really high on Miami. I'm also starting to come around on Clemson a little bit more than I was. They're sitting at 14. And I think you're right. I think the ACC is going to be pretty exciting. Virginia Tech's got a really good team this year. I think we're going to see some definitely more excitement out of the ACC than we usually do with generally just Florida State and Clemson. It's one of those two every year. We're going to see some good games out of there. And I'm excited about it for sure.
That was a nice little segue, Juck, into some AP poll discussion, which was on our schedule for today. Looking to pull up my screen here. My screen's been a little laggy lately when I'm sharing stuff, so hopefully it's not too bad for those of you guys that are watching on my channel or on Juck's channel. It looks like you got that one linked, Juck, but we can talk about some more broad AP poll discussion because both of the teams we cover, Oregon at number 3, Ohio State at number 2. I just bought my flight to go cover that game out in Eugene. Let's just get some thoughts on how this poll ultimately shakes out. I think you got Texas there at 4. That one makes a lot of sense. Quinn Ewers comes back. They've been able to do a really good job on the recruiting trail and in the transfer portal. I think that they are maybe more ready for the SEC than Oklahoma is, at least on paper. But this poll with both of our schools in the top 5 certainly lends itself to some interesting conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't disagree with Georgia at number 1. I mean, I understand the logic. I would have Ohio State number 1, of course, but I can't disagree with the logic to have Georgia number 1. I did think it would be closer. Ohio State only got like 14 votes. Georgia got about 56 for number 1. I did see Oregon got one first place vote, but that was interesting. Texas belongs at number 4. I think maybe some overvaluing of Alabama at number 5. I don't know. They're really giving DeBoer and them the benefit of the doubt. But, it's Alabama. I understand why they would do that. I kind of like Ole Miss over them if I was choosing. I really think that they beefed up in the trenches. We know that they can put up some points. And I think this might be the year that Ole Miss finally cracks the door and is able to beat one of the big guys in the conference. But definitely I agree with you that Texas is loaded and they're going to do well in their first year in the SEC. I know a lot of people think that it's going to be, they're in for a rude awakening when they go through an SEC schedule. I just don't see it. But I think the most important thing for Texas is to go up and get that win up in Michigan before they start SEC play, because going and starting that after winning an out or losing an out of conference game to Michigan would be that'd be a tough road.
I like what you said about Ole Miss for how much swag they have around that program. I'm just gonna say swag because I think Ole Miss has some of the best uniforms in the game right now, and I just love watching those on the screen. They've really done a great job in the transfer portal. For some of my listeners, they obviously are aware of Oregon's recruitment of Walter Nolan, who was the number one defensive lineman in the transfer portal. He was down to Oregon and Ole Miss, ended up choosing to stay in the SEC after packing his bags and leaving College Station. So for all the big time talent that Ole Miss has gotten, I also love how Lane Kiffin carries himself as a coach. Just kind of like doesn't care how he's perceived, and he just says whatever he's thinking right there in that moment. Absolutely elite social media game. I'm ready for Ole Miss to break down the door for sure. And then we also got Michigan debuting at number 9, fresh off of a national championship title. I think that I don't really know how I feel about Michigan. I think at first it was like, oh, okay, they're not going to be that great because of all that they lost. You lose Jim Harbaugh, who goes to the NFL. But now I'm kind of coming around a bit more on Michigan as far as just having quality coaching and being able to maintain some continuity along that coaching staff. But for me, until we see what that quarterback situation looks like with names like Alex Orji in the mix, I don't really know where I stand on the Wolverines just yet.
I think for sure they are the biggest mystery of anybody in the top 10 as to what exactly they're going to look like. We know that the defense, the starters are going to be elite. They have no depth. I think the offensive line, despite losing all 5, they've got a lot of guys with starting experience, so they're going to be pretty good. And we know they know how to coach offensive line. Alex Orji, I saw that he was named the starter. I don't know how reliable that source was. I think I saw that last night. I think that's a guy who is going to come around a little bit as the season goes. I don't think he's going to be quite as bad as a lot of my Buckeyes hope he's going to be. I think he's going to come around. He is one heck of an athlete, absolutely incredible running the ball. So I do think that they're going to be a little better than I originally anticipated, but they are like 127th in returning production. At some point, you think that that's going to end up wearing down, and you're going to be dipping into some places you don't want to be at. And we know they don't recruit great. They have developed good, but I don't know how deep they go. As the season wears on, they might have some issues, and I still ultimately think that they're going to lose all 3 of their big games to Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State.
All right, there you go. The Michigan take from an Ohio State guy. I'm just excited to see what Michigan looks like this year as one of the story programs in college football. They are one of those more interesting teams that you mentioned with their recruiting. They don't recruit at an elite level clip. It always has kind of felt like they have a little bit more left in the tank as far as expectations go with what they're able to do. But man, the guys that they do get on that roster are just some downright studs. I think one guy that stands out to me is Mason Graham, because he was one of the first recruits that I actually covered as I started to beef up my coverage in Southern California before I moved out here to Long Beach. For your audience that maybe doesn't know where I'm located, I cover high school football down here in SoCal, and Mason Graham was at Servite, and I covered him when the Friars had Tetairoa McMillan, the one-time Oregon commit who ended up flipping to Arizona. But that was one of the other names that I was kind of told to watch, and I wanted to get my eyes on in person, was Mason Graham, who Oregon wanted to go after. They were going after, but I think they were just a little bit too late getting into the mix there in the class of 2022. And he was pretty solid with the Wolverines. So the Wolverines will be a fun one to watch for sure. Just to kind of wrap up maybe some West Coast talk, we got Utah at number 12 ahead of their first year in the Big 12. We have Arizona at number 21. They moved from Jed Fish. And then you also have USC at 23 under Lincoln Riley in their first year. We know they're getting the season going against LSU, despite some reported efforts to bail on that game. But that's going to be a different part of the conversation. I got a ton of love for the Utes, who will return with Cam Rising for his 50th season in college football. Of course, I'm joking there, but for a guy who's battled a lot of injury, I love the way he carries himself. He is just an absolute dog on the field. Yes. Lots of physicality, not afraid to put his body on the line. Not sure how Ute fans feel about that one, but I think, honestly, heading into year one of this new look Big 12, I either got Utah or Arizona primed to contend among the very top because you love what you see from Noah Fafita there in Tucson as well?
Hey, I haven't heard anybody else pick Arizona. Definitely, I think Utah is the favorite. I like the Arizona pick. I'm kind of leaning towards Kansas and Utah in that championship game. Obviously, Whittingham is just awesome. Cam Rising, fantastic. I think they're undervalued at 12. I would have had them in the top 10. I would have had them over Florida State. But Arizona, that's an interesting one. I'm not too familiar with their new coach. I don't really know a ton about him, but they definitely got some skill. When we talk about McMillan and Fafita, I mean, there's definitely some talent there. I was surprised they were able to retain those two guys after Jed Fish left, to be honest. But Kansas State also going to be in the mix. Oklahoma State as well. That's a really exciting conference this year. It could go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, Arizona, they bring in Brent Brennan, who comes over from San Jose State. Maybe I got a little bit more riding on the Wildcats as a San Jose native myself. So I always mess with the Spartans a little bit.
Okay.
Admittedly, don't know a wealth of knowledge about Brent Brennan, but to your point, that was Arizona's biggest win of the entire offseason, hanging on to Noah Fafita and Tyrone McMillan, who were teammates at Servite, who I just got finished talking about. I really didn't have that big of expectations for Noah Fafita. I first saw him when I went to that practice at Servite, and I was like, dang, that's their starting quarterback? This guy's tiny, but the dude is just a gamer. And I think if you have a quarterback, wide receiver tandem in general, you're in good contention for most games. But Fafita and T-Mac have a special connection, and I think that's part of the reason why I'm so bullish on the Arizona Wildcats. Before we get any further on today's show, want to give a big thank you to one of our sponsors here on the Ducks Dish podcast, and that is Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your dinner plans are tonight, but I can help you out a little bit. You need to head on over to Ranchito at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Give their homemade tortillas a try. They got great food, a great environment, and they will take care of you. Say what's up to my guy Ruben and let him know that Max Torres sent you. Super happy to have Juck on Bucks on today's episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching if you haven't already. We are super grateful to have you here, and we hope you'll be able to make it to our second live stream of the day, where I will be joined by the man himself, Justin Hopkins, for another edition of Oregon Recruiting Hour. That is scheduled for 10:50 a.m. here on the West Coast. Juck, we've done a lot of really good big picture talk, a little bit of Buckeyes, a little bit of Ducks, but let's hammer home this Oregon-Ohio State game, because I know your kind of tone around this game has maybe changed a little bit. But let's start off with some of your thoughts on Will Howard, because I know for my listeners, my audience, the widespread belief is that Will Howard is going to be the best quarterback that the Ducks face all year long. So what do you think about the Kansas State transfer and one of the newest Buckeyes?
I've rode the roller coaster on Will Howard. I started off being very excited, having just seen him a couple of times at Kansas State when we first signed him. And I was very excited about it. And then, we kind of started digging in and seeing some of the warts, and the off season's long. You really start to dig in on a player and you look for the potential, the bad in him, and what might not be so great, what needs improved. I've come all the way back up. He has just performed. Spring was rough, but this preseason camp, things up and up and up. Fantastic. He's got the offense down, looking great. I think the most exciting thing is we didn't really know what direction they were going to go as far as running him. And they have, they've embraced it. They said they're going to be allowing him to run. And I think if you bring in a guy like that and you try to use him like you use McCord, that would be a big mistake. His part of his skill is running. That's part of his skill set. Let's see some of that. So I think we're going to see some of that. He has definitely become a real leader on the team, got his body right. He looks fantastic. So I'm feeling really, really confident about Will Howard. He's not the best quarterback in the country. He doesn't need to be with this team. He needs to be a smart general out there, and I think he will be.
Got some of his stats from his time at Kansas State up here on the screen for those of you guys that are watching here on YouTube or Facebook, Twitter /X as well. For me with Will Howard, I think he's what the Buckeyes needed as far as an experienced signal caller, someone who has played a lot of football and isn't going to overthink in those big situations. Kansas State is one of my favorite programs that is just every single year solid, like rock solid. They're not a juggernaut by any means, but you see them on your schedule and you're like, I don't know if I like that matchup, because they're really well coached, they're disciplined, and they get the absolute most out of their guys. So now Will Howard's in Columbus, and he's got some crazy talent to work with. Obviously, Jeremiah Smith, that wide receiver that is making some buzz in fall camp as the former #1 recruit in the 2024 class. One of the stats that catches my eye here, Juck, with Will Howard, 351 rushing yards last year on 81 carries, the most in his college career, according to ESPN. 9 touchdowns, though. The yardage doesn't really make it pop off the page, but 9 touchdowns is not something to gloss over. I think that you got to have the right situation to run him, and he looks like he's someone that can really get it done with his legs. So I think that's obviously a big component of what's going to make him dangerous when the Ducks and the Buckeyes face off on October 12th.
He was asked what he prefers, throwing a touchdown pass or running it in. He said running it in. I had a listener who went back, and they played a lot of Avery Johnson last year as well. He went back and watched every single drive and charted it up. And that Kansas State offense under Will Howard converted a touchdown 42 out of 50 drives in the red zone. If you compare that to the rest of the country, that was 5 percentage points better than the second place team. #1, Will Howard in the red zone. And it's because of that right there. He is absolutely elite at that. He's elite at the RPO game down there. You get and that's quite honestly, that's an area Ohio State struggled in for the last several years, is converting touchdowns in the red zone. We're really excited to get that percentage up, and he definitely converts down there with his legs.
And for Oregon's defense, just to look at the other side of the coin, this is probably the best secondary that I think the Ducks are going to have since the 2019 season, when they had Justin Herbert as a senior. They capped off that year with a Rose Bowl win over the Wisconsin Badgers. And for as much talent as Oregon has, they recruit the talent well across the board. I feel like there's just been a little bit left to be desired in that secondary, Juck, that they haven't necessarily been playing up to that level that they need to. You say that when you look at last year's games against Washington, you say, well, Max, that was an elite wide receiver core. Michael Penix pieced up everybody he faced darn near. But that's just the reality. Maybe it's not Washington this year that you need to get through. It's Ohio State or Wisconsin. Not that they're known for being a premier passing team, or who knows who they'll face in the playoffs. So I think that heading into this year's matchup, especially looking at the last time these two teams played, Juck, Oregon got torched through the air in 2021. They were able to come away with a win, but you'd be lying to yourself if you said that they defended the pass well that day against CJ Stroud. So I think Oregon's improved defensive back play, led by Jabbar Muhammad out of Washington, Brandon Johnson out of Duke, Kobe Savage out of Kansas State. A lot of Kansas State love on the show today, and I'm here for it. I think that improved secondary is really going to help them this year when it comes to that matchup.
Absolutely. And, this is a game that, it's just so exciting. We've broken it down probably, I don't know, every which way you can. I really don't think I'm going to have any real idea of how it's going to look until we actually see what these Buckeyes look like on offense. You know what I mean? It's all speculation until we see what their fastball is, which was one of my major questions. They've talked about finding their fastball, Chip Kelly and Ryan Day, and we finally get to see what they're going for. What is your fastball? What is this offense going to look like? Absolutely can't wait. I'm expecting more of a running game. You look at an offense like 2019, the Buckeyes ran the ball 62% of the time. That was a fantastic offense under Justin Fields, J.K. Dobbins with 2,000 yards. Something like that is really what I think we're going to see. 10 carries a game from Justin Fields that year. Will Howard only rushed the ball 4 times a game at Kansas State. So I think we're going to see some more of that and some more leaning on the run.
And then adding to the intrigue around this Buckeye offensive attack in 2024, a former Duck, former head coach Chip Kelly is now in Columbus as well. I don't think I had told you this, but I actually got to meet Chip Kelly for the first time earlier this spring when I was out at Sierra Canyon for their joint showcase with with Newberry Park. Got a little bit of kinks here as the week gets underway. Forgive me, folks. And Newberry Park is led by Florida State quarterback commit Brady Smigel. And of course, we were talking about Florida State earlier, but it felt weird, Juck, to see Chip Kelly wearing that little Buckeye patch on his shirt, roaming the recruiting hotbed that is Southern California. One more topic I think that catches my eye with this matchup, and I want to get your thoughts on this one, of course, the Ohio State offensive line, because for however good or bad you thought McCord was last year, I think most people agree it was a down year for Ohio State at quarterback. It felt like, and correct me if I'm remembering this wrong, people didn't think a whole lot of that Ohio State offensive line, at least not up to the standard that I think it's usually at. And then now you look at Oregon's defensive line led by Jordan Birch, Derek Harmon, who comes over from Big Ten country, Michigan State, Jamari Caldwell, and Mateo Uyunglele. This defensive front is going to be, in my opinion, worlds better than it was the first time the Ducks and the Buckeyes faced off, or the last time I should say they faced off in 2021. So what do you make of that matchup, Ohio State's O-line versus Oregon's D-line? Because Oregon's D-line is looking pretty nice.
Yeah, they sure are. The Ohio State offensive line was obviously the biggest question mark we had heading into the spring, heading into the fall. I'm telling you what, Max, I'm bullish on this line. This is going to be a good line. Josh Simmons at left tackle has really transformed his body. He's already a great athlete. He's going to be his first or second round pick. Donovan Jackson right next to him, definitely on the trajectory to be a middle round pick, senior, and he's looking fantastic. Seth McLaughlin bringing him in at center, probably one of the bigger moves that we didn't really talk about much when it happened. But moving from Carson Hinsman, who last year didn't play great at center, he was a second-year guy tossed into there, to now Seth McLaughlin, who everybody's asking him questions on the offensive line. The guy knows everything, incredibly smart, a great general out there, which is fantastic at center. And then the biggest question mark that everybody had was in the portal, they wanted to replace Josh Fryer at right tackle. Josh Fryer was kind of the whipping boy of the offensive line. Josh Fryer goes out and wins the Iron Buckeye in the spring, wins it again in the fall. One of just two guys to do that on the entire team. He's looking fantastic. We've heard nothing but great news about him. And like the guy, really rooting for him. Tegra Shabola is going to be the new starter, most likely at right guard. It's between him and Hinsman. He's a top 40 overall recruit 3 years ago. I think this offensive line is going to look like an entirely different unit than we saw last year. And leaning heavily on the run, every offensive lineman's dream. I'm telling you, it's going to look like a revamped line with three of the same pieces there. And it's an exciting unit. I'm hoping that they're going to prove me right on this one.
And when you're talking about the offensive line, Juck, even with three guys returning from a year ago, I was thinking about what Will Stein was saying the other day, because Oregon's kind of dealing with a little bit of offensive line injuries here in not even in fall camp. We're in week one. What am I saying?
I know it.
it's a developmental position. So maybe the offensive line wasn't what you wanted it to be last year, but Ohio State really recruits offensive linemen very, very well. So you have another year with those guys in the system. Maybe you get some early contributions from some guys that you maybe weren't expecting. And I think that there's potential for that to make this matchup even more fun, because man, that Ohio State running game has got a lot of people excited, led by none other than former Oregon running back coach Carlos Lachlan, who is now in Columbus as well. The Oregon-Ohio State connections are just bananas, but that Ohio State running back room is going to have a challenge of its own, facing some of these guys in the Oregon front seven. We talked a bit earlier about that defensive line. Now we got to maybe mention Justin Jacobs, Jeffrey Bassa, who have just been getting raved about all offseason long in Eugene. You got the new in-helmet communication. I think Jeffrey Bassa has already been so lauded as a communicator. I was talking to someone around the program in Eugene on Friday night, and they were just really raving about how he's just an all-level communicator, all-world communicator. And I think that that's something that really can't be undervalued when you're looking at the teams that Oregon's facing, because you got to have veterans at as many positions as possible. And the Ducks, I think, have one of the best linebackers that they've had in a while in Jeffrey Bassa, getting everything set up on that defense.
I'm with you. I listened to him after at Big Ten Media Days. What an intelligent kid. Absolutely seems like a great leader. And I've kind of been pounding this same drum about Cody Simon on the Ohio State team, who is going to be the green dot guy for the Buckeyes. And just what a great advantage it is to have a guy like Cody Simon or Bassa in the middle with the green dot, communicating, a guy that everybody on the defense looks up to and respects. It's there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to struggle with that this year. I don't think Oregon and Ohio State are going to be two of those teams because of those two guys. And I think it's really a big advantage for sure.
There's one more guy I wanted to hit on, Juck. I just wanted to make sure that we had enough time on your end of things.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I was thinking we could talk. We haven't talked a whole lot of recruiting, but maybe we'll just have to get on another show to get up with some recruiting talk. Let's focus some more on team stuff, because we are, after all, like we said, in week 1 of the season. Caleb Downs. We can't go a whole show without talking about Caleb Downs, man, because he was, I think, by a lot of people viewed as maybe the top overall player in the transfer portal. So. And I don't think Ohio State went too heavy in the portal, but when he hopped into the transfer portal, you can bet everybody on that staff had his name circled in red ink out there in Columbus. The former Alabama safety, who was an absolute stud as a true freshman, he heads to Columbus to continue his college football career following Nick Saban's retirement. What does Caleb Downs mean to the Ohio State Buckeyes in 24?
It's just amazing when you have a defense like they had last year. You basically get all the starters back, aside from Mike Hall, was basically the only guy who went to the NFL, and a couple of the linebackers who've been replaced with better linebackers, in my opinion. But to bring in Downs, who is, we listen to him, and it is like he's a savant. The guy, Matt Guerrieri, the safeties coach, said the first thing they did together was watch every play of his from Alabama last year. They watched every play together. And obviously there's nothing on the screen, it doesn't tell you the down, the distance, the formation, anything. And he said he recited the down, the distance, the formation to him every single play of every game last year. The guy's a savant. He's an unbelievable leader in a quiet way. Everybody looks up to him already. He's just ridiculous. He's the best athlete in the secondary. He's the best at everything, and he's humble, and he's just a great dude. The fact that we've got this guy for 2 years is just it's just unbelievable. You can't even put into words what this means and how valuable this is.
I, for one, cannot wait to see Caleb Downs this upcoming season. A guy who was a two-way star in high school. I think he was also a hell of a running back out there in Georgia when he was playing his high school ball. And then now he's able to focus on one side of the ball. I think that's something that isn't quite discussed enough or maybe understood by some college football fans. You play two ways in high school because your team needs you to, or just you're such a dude that you can't stay off the field. But once you get to the next level, you're playing with so much talent around you that it's like, hey, Caleb, we don't need you to be toting the rock. What we need you doing is roaming that secondary, getting some picks and laying some big hits. He's an absolute dog and plays with so much fire. I just love watching that guy play. So I don't know if my listeners are going to get upset with me hyping up an Ohio State guy, but I don't want to be a homer. You got to respect where it's due. And Caleb Downs seems like a guy that is going to do big things this year.
It's interesting you bring up him running the ball. He really wants to run the ball, Max. I mean, he really wants to run the ball. They brought it up. So Ryan Day brought it up to him when they were recruiting. I mean, it was part of their thing in the original recruitment, then again in the portal recruitment, that, he wants to touch the ball in some capacity, either returning punts or running the ball. And obviously they don't want him running the ball, right? Like that's not something that the coaching staff is going to want. They just asked him in a press conference last week about the potential of that. Do you take it seriously? Oh, absolutely. I mean, maybe up to 10 plays a game or, 10 snaps a game. This is just something that keeps coming up. And I just feel like at some point, because he is so valuable, that they're going to throw him something like that. And I can't wait to see it. There's a lot of people very much against it. because the depth at safety is not fantastic right now. It's probably, the most concerning area of the team is the depth at safety when we talk about the depth. Aside from that, this team, the two deep is the deepest I've ever seen. It's just wild. But it is interesting that you brought that up about running the ball because he wants to touch the ball.
Because I saw that in the spring, I think it was, and I think that some journalists were just saying, "Oh man, like I was waiting to hear something like that. Let me go get on my keyboard and write it up." And then I think some people were like, "Well, is that really something that's going to happen?" Especially when you have Quinshon Judkins
Right.
in the backfield with Henderson. I think is the second part of that running back committee.
Yeah.
But the talent's just insane. I think I'd be for it, but at the same time, part of me has to think that the Ohio State staff's like, we can't risk getting this guy injured if we don't need to put extra hits on him.
They definitely don't want to do it, but it'll be interesting to see the kind of tug of war because he wants to, and he's certainly showing them that he's doing everything he's supposed to do and then some. If they talked about it in recruiting and Ryan Day gave him his word, I mean, at some point, I think we're going to see it in some capacity.
Well, we'll have to see if we see Caleb Downs toting the rock this season. We're just about a month and a half away from Oregon versus Ohio State, October 12th in Autzen Stadium. I am planning to be there, and I hope you guys are going to be there too. Juck, it's been an awesome convo, man, but I got to just ask, anything else you want to add before we get you out of here?
No, except for I was originally, Max, thinking that the game between the Buckeyes and the Ducks out in Eugene was about a coin flip game. Going to go either way. Coming out of fall, I no longer think that. I now think that the Buckeyes are going to win that game. Now, I'm sure we'll talk again before that game. That's how I'm feeling right now. How about you?
We will definitely be talking before that game. I think there's too much time not to. I think that I have to give Oregon the edge in that game for a couple of reasons. I think you're at home. You're working with more talent than Oregon has ever seen. I think you have a plus head coach in Dan Lanning. Not too sure the Ducks had that in Mario Cristobal the first time these two teams played. Not trying to take anything away from the Ducks in that game. I'm just thinking that they're much more well-rounded now from head to toe than they were the first time these two teams met in Columbus back in 2021 in the shoe. So you're giving the Buckeyes the edge. I think I'm giving the Ducks the edge. Dan Lanning needs that marquee win. Maybe doesn't need it, but I bet that there's some part of him that probably wants that one. And I think that one's obviously what they got circled on the schedule.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much for having me, man. Appreciate you.
You got it. Make sure you guys tap in with Juck on Bucks on any social media platform. I know that's his channel on YouTube. If you want to find more of me, you can follow me on all social media platforms at Torres Sports. Subscribe to the Scoop Duck on 3 YouTube channel. Come and see us at scoopduck.com where you can get a 50% off deal as we run our kickoff sale here to begin the season. Big thank you to Juck on Bucks, and thank you to you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.